Riot Games is one of the most successful names within the video game space. While that's obvious, it doesn't mean that their record is squeaky clean. If you've played any of their massive titles, specifically League of Legends, you know that the decisions they make can be questionable. In this video, I'll be explaining their worst ones in my opinion. Starting off with the most recent fumble, on October 16th of 2023, the official Riot Games Twitter account announced that starting November 20th, they'd be rolling out a new username system where players can no longer have unique, one-of-a-kind names. Instead, you'll be distinguished from other players with a tagline number code, meaning if 100,000 people wanted the name Tyler1, they could have it. Needless to say, the community was not happy about this. Players like feeling the individuality and exclusivity of having their own name. The biggest concern here is Riot's out-of-touch behavior in terms of making big changes like this. No one in the community asked for this. There shouldn't be any other reasons for such an insane decision that was seemingly out of nowhere. Well, what is Riot's reasoning for this in the first place? Lore. It's lore. They say that the term summoner name doesn't sync with the lore, and instead of simply naming it something else, they're deciding to go forward with something that the community immediately hated. This behavior from Riot is no longer surprising. However, it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what the LoL player base has had to deal with over the years. In terms of the modern trollage that Riot Games has done against its own community, the removal of pings to your teammates is a perfect reflection of their inability to understand core issues. If you didn't know, recently Riot pretty much removed pinging as a form of communication. While certain pings like the MIA ping or the danger ping and others within that category have remained the same, any pings that are available by using the scoreboard can no longer be seen by your own teammates. On the surface level, it doesn't sound too bad. This is clearly to disable certain toxic traits that we as a community have manifested through the system of communication that we've had for all of these years. Traits like spam pinging someone's champion icon, either when they're alive just to lash out anger towards a specific player, or when they're dead for the same reason, but also specifically targeting the fact that they've been defeated. However, a very quick 2-minute mental evaluation can lead you to understand that this change is just a pathetic cop-out to what combating toxicity actually looks like. All this has done is remove a core aspect of team coordination and communication altogether. These types of communication leads to your team potentially making plays with said information that result in a positive outcome that otherwise could have never been accomplished without those little shoutouts. Aside from strategic communication, spamming a teammate's icon was never always a negative thing. Often, someone would do it to show their support of a teammate playing really well, basically gassing them up. This is far from the first time Riot has tried introducing system changes that they deemed to be for the purpose of reducing toxic tendencies, yet ended up just being confusing and unwanted. Another solution they came up with was removing visibility of usernames in champion select, and rolling out an aspect of anonymity. Once again, on the surface level, this idea doesn't seem bad. The main thing that this new system was hoping to change for the better was the excess of dodging matches in ranked solo duo. Even if you are not a player who usually queues up for ranked, you've probably heard of the term dodging. There are certain reasons for a player to dodge a casual blind or draft pick match. This is usually because you weren't able to pick the champion you wanted, or you were just countered and didn't want to play it out. While this carries into ranked, it's become a much larger issue within that type of queue. From the perspective of an average player, you'd assume people dodge for the same reasons that I just listed. And while that's part of it, most people end up dodging a match to avoid having to play with one of their randomly selected teammates. In ranked, most of the players want the highest possible chance to win every match, so they would mainly dodge teammates who were autofilled, or teammates that are hostage in your lobby because they don't like you for whatever reason. This is an issue because it's extremely annoying to have to sit through multiple queue times and champ select stages just to be able to play the game. However, this decision to introduce champion select anonymity would prove to not fix a single thing. First of all, there is a program called Lobby Reveal, and probably others as well, that show your teammates' usernames. The way the client's code works is that the information like the names of your teammates is still available to you. However, it's hidden behind what the client prioritizes showing you. A program like this one just shows you the names too. So right away, players figured out a way around this, and Riot has never bothered trying to punish people for it besides deeming it illegal to use and bannable. Yet yet it's an empty threat considering they don't seem to be able to detect a player using it, nor do they really punish people for it. Second of all, the two main reasons for people dodging are directly caused by Riot's failure to tackle the real issues at their core. Autofill has been around for many years, yet we know that a large chunk of the community doesn't like this system and would prefer to wait longer in queue if it meant that them and their teammates would be on roll. Two simple solutions to fix this that Riot has not publicly considered are either removing autofill or creating a separate queue where it's removed and seeing which queue ends up being the more popular to know for sure. Then in terms of the issues of players hostaging in champ select, it's simply toxic players not being punished properly, which is ultimately causing the other main half of dodging in a negative context. Instead of directly combating the actual issues, they target and nerf the solutions that we as a player base have come to, in this case being the dodging mechanic. In terms of the community getting absolutely shafted for no reason, Riot Games doesn't give us space to breathe. Potentially the most questionable and hated decision Riot has made was definitely removing Duo Queue and Master Plus. They made this change in Season 11 to increase the quality of skill in the highest ranks. Basically, they didn't want the integrity of the highest elos to be grieved by players who are carried by their duo. However, the aftermath of their decision has made playing League in high elo the most unfun it has ever been. Because the decision to ignore the quality of high elo matches in terms of regulating the scripting, toxicity, and boosting was not necessarily a choice in the sense that I've been using for this video, I'm not going to cover this issue in depth. However, this is a real problem, and along with having the possibility of duoing impossible, the state of high elo in North America is extremely unfun and unrewarding. The point of their decision once again has not affected the player base positively at all, and they don't really care to do anything about it. The majority of the players are between silver and platinum, and the LCS orgs import all of their players from the other regions, so the integrity of our high elo ladder doesn't matter to Riot. In terms of the negative fallout for the League of Legends branding, the biggest thing stemming from this issue is how streamers don't have a lot of fun playing their game in high elo. This attitude trickles down to their viewers and forms a cult of people repeating the phrase, "League is dying." However, League should have really died a long time ago, considering they've never added voice chat. I think it's just insane that the largest team-based video game in the entire world does not have voice chat, but every other one does. Also, the League voice feature is not what I'm talking about. That is only within pre-made lobbies, and at that point, people are using Discord anyways. Valorant introduced voice chat because naturally you'd assume that first-person shooter games should always have it, as if it's essential to that type of game. Though I'd argue League of Legends as a MOBA is more team-oriented than Valorant is. In terms of reasoning for not adding it, obviously the only reason is toxicity. Hot take though, I think League would be less toxic and more fun if voice chat was introduced. A lot of the people who are toxic using a keyboard would never pull up in a VC with the same energy. Even if they did, the mute feature exists for a reason. So along with having no voice chat, not being able to duo, and not being able to communicate through pings, we now have a team-oriented game with no team-based communication systems in place. While this communication system is newly implemented, something that has been around for ages is the modern League of Legends client. In 2017, Riot decided to do a complete overhaul of it. It seems as though they decided to change it mainly because they were sick of having to constantly renovate it. I'm assuming this is in terms of the clarity and visual aesthetics. I do like the way it looks now more than how it used to, and I go more over that in my last video, so I'd suggest watching that if you want to see how League was like in its very first season. Either way, the day the new client arrived marked the day of reckoning. This spaghetti code client to this day has to be the buggiest interface out of any hyper popular game, and it's extremely embarrassing.
What just happened? Wait, did I click accept? I don't remember clicking a button. Bro, I wish to God Riot would release their client code.
These bugs are not isolated events, and it's never gotten better, or so it feels that way. In 2021, this article was released showing Riot's response and explanation as to why the client sucked. Basically, the way it was set up was overly complicated, and while they'd commit to improving the existing client, the option to scrap it and overhaul again was on the table, and that apparently the client issues were the priority for Riot. However, even now in late 2023, it's still more of a meme than anything else. Speaking of memes, the Season 10 item overhaul and introduction of mythics is impossible to ignore within the context of this video. This impacted the game in such a negative way, and it's obvious in hindsight because Riot is removing mythics soon. Many champions became lost in terms of their identity, build paths were too strict and didn't really allow players to experiment in a way that you could before, which took away a lot of fun. As for the meta, it was all about the items. It was less about which champions were the strongest and more about which champions were the strongest with the strongest items. For example, currently Hullbreaker is the most broken item, so the strongest champions are whoever can naturally utilize this item to its fullest potential. Champions like Garen, Fiora, and Jax have all become so hard to deal with because they just split push the entire match, cause an insane amount of pressure, and feel impossible to punish. Although, in terms of redesigns in general, Riot's track record is not great. Not only does this show through the failed mythics, but also in the new ranked emblems. Try thinking about how Riot paid a team of people actual salaries to literally downgrade these designs to some minimalist trash. And this is just one example of Riot going in a minimalist design direction. We can also look at the World Championship trophy of 2015 and compare it to the one we had last year and the one we had this year. In my opinion, this minimalist style that they've been slowly implementing takes the soul out of the game and plays for essentially nothing special. Also, to put it in perspective, it's not that Riot is oblivious to making good designs. Look at this Twitter post showing off the new designs for Wild Rift's rank emblems. These are the coolest ones I've ever seen, and it's the mobile version of our game. I understand that the meta right now for branding is like the minimalist angle, and that's because it's easier to slap a logo onto something when the design isn't too intricate, so when Riot rebranded the logos, it made sense. However, taking away the creativity from designs that are not based around the branding aspects like the world trophies or the ranked emblems always seems to leave the community with a sour taste in their mouths. Though on the opposite end of simplistic design is Cassante. This character is just insanely overloaded, and honestly, I feel as though Cassante is objectively the most broken character in League right now. His presence in the World Championships is heavy, let alone the rest of pro play this year, and that's just the obvious way to point it out. Playing against this champion is just so insanely unfair. He has Riven tier mobility and damage, but also has the tankiness and disruption of Poppy. There's really nothing else to say about it. The only positive thing about Cassante's design is the inclusivity of his identity in lore. While Riot seemingly cares if you're black and gay, being a woman is clearly not enough of a minority for sexual harassment to be off the table. In 2018, Melanie McCracken and Jez Negron filed a $100 million class action gender discrimination lawsuit. This case was under the claims that there were acts and negative work culture surrounding gender discrimination, sexual harassment, and sexual misconduct at Riot Games. Before this lawsuit was filed, an expose about the sexist culture in Riot Games was released by Kotaku, which is a gaming news site. Within this article, the unnamed whistleblower mentioned how women would often not be considered for leadership positions within the organization because they weren't, quote, gamer enough, and other arbitrary reasons that led to an extremely toxic work environment. This culture also led women to be violated under the Equal Pay Act in California in many ways. A list is available to look at provided by shrm.org that includes examples of these violations, like requiring female workers to temporarily fulfill roles above their title and pay grade, then ultimately hiring a man to fill that role. It's pretty surreal reading this, considering you'd think an insanely established business wouldn't be so blatantly unfair to its employees. You would think that after all of this information it couldn't get worse, but it does. Riot actually pushed for all of these cases to go through arbitration through the company rather than going to trial, meaning that they would be more private. As LA Times stated, studies have shown that employees win less often in arbitration than they do in court. All of this to say, Riot forced people to help their company save face while also making their case have a lower win rate. As I stated earlier, the lawsuit ended up costing Riot a total of $100 million, which was the largest gender discrimination settlement in the California Department of Civil Rights' history. $80 million of which went towards any female employees that worked at Riot Games between November of 2014 and December of 2021, meaning that at least 2,300 people were eligible to receive compensation from this payout. The employees within these parameters were given a larger chunk of the settlement the earlier they worked there, considering that on average, they dealt with these issues more than newer employees. Riot also implemented new workplace policy reforms, which meant transparency around employee pay scales for new job applicants. And they also had to be monitored by a third party for 3 years on the human resources side of things. Along with other important things, they were basically forced to put a band-aid on what for some people was a crack in concrete. While it seems as though Riot moved forward as best as they could, who knows if all of it was just a formality. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope I was able to satisfy all of your anger with Riot, and if I missed anything, let me know in the comments. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. See ya.